Hello everyone, this is your Flashback, and today I'm actually not coming to you with a new review or anything like that, but more something of a discussion that's been on my mind for, or just kind of something that I've been thinking about for a while. With this new, the Snow White and the Huntsman movie that came out, and the Mirror that came out before it, uh, it seems, I guess, now is the time to start redoing fairy tales as live action movies, be they like comedies or dark actiony dramas, like I guess Huntsman is. And I haven't seen either. I'm going to see Huntsman, Snow White and the Huntsman sometime this week, and I've already watched a review of it. Uh, so I kind of know what to expect. But my thing now is that like this whole thing of fairy tale films, I guess, is my kind of uh, the subject that's been running through my mind for a while. I mean, you have, as always, and we always will have these. You have the Disney interpretation of the fairy tales, and those are all well and good for what they are, as animated films. And for the most part, and I will say for the most part, the Disney renderings of classic fairy tales are generally true, at least kind of like they are within like the spirit kind of the original story. Generally, I mean, obviously fairy tales aren't meant. I really don't think that a lot of fairy tales are meant to be like these whole romance type things that Disney seems to be able to make a fast buck off of, but they're more like warnings or like stories to like warn children of the time or kind of educate them on being aware of the world around them. At least as they were back when they were previously written. But I think now in this modern time, and I think this has been the kind of thought for a long while. A lot of us think that fairy tales are these kind of romantic type stories or whatever, or just kind of they're stories for children with a kind of I really don't know what, but I guess like the most classic ones for the most part that like for the most part everyone knows and that Disney's made all their money off are like the classic type romantic romance type fairy tales, and although you can kind of argue the other way, so free to do that in the comment section below if you wish. But so I kind of raised the question today of what should what is the kind of the best direction to go in with adapting fairy tales into live action films? And I know a couple have been done like way back in the past. Like I know there was this old French version of Beauty and the Beast that's been done. Uh, and then there was the more modern, based off the novel of the same name, Beastly, which I haven't seen. And then, as I previously said, Mirror Mirror and Snow White and the Huntsman are the Snow White story. Uh, whereas Beauty and the Beast and the Beast are obviously Beauty and the Beast. So what is it that we should kind of look for or want to see in these kinds of adaptations? And I guess in particular, me for myself, what is it that I want? And I'm not quite sure. Which is kind of stupid if I'm making this video, but kind of raise the subject. Kind of, I'm on my summer break now, so I can do these kinds of videos or whatever. I just have like things I'm questioning, kind of want to put them out there online. Uh, where then I can't type all this out on Twitter. Yeah, just can't. So for me personally, I think that fairy tales should generally have a serious tone to them. Uh, I guess shit. And this is another one like on the spot videos. Really, like I'm trying to like gather my thoughts as I do this video. Really, so But I mean, like overall, I think that these like when fairy tales are adapted into like live action films for the general public, I think that there should be a generally serious take on them as opposed to like the very much romanticized Disney versions or the and there's always like the super dark original version of the tales which that varies from tale to tale, but because fairy tales have been redone and rewritten by countless people over the centuries, so it's hard to really like pick an exact version of the story uh, to be redone. Uh, but generally, I think that a fairy tale story, and in today's filmmaking kind of thing, I think that it's about time we got a more serious adaptations of fairy tales as opposed to like the very light and fluffy-ish Disney version. And the Disney versions are dark too, but they're not extremely serious. I mean, they're family films. Films for the family. So yes, most of the Disney films have have serious moments. They have light moments. They have funny. They have dark. They have action, comedy. You name it for the most part. For the most part, I'm not saying that everything that they all have it all the time, but generally they have a mix of everything because it's a family film and it's meant to appeal to all ages as opposed to just something you'd babysit in front of your children with for like an hour or two, or something for an adult to watch, or something for a teenager to watch, or something for a super old person to watch. They're made for everyone. At least they used to be. Uh, or they should be generally. But so I mean, I would like to see like I have not seen Huntsman yet, but from the way it looks very serious, and from what I've heard in the review, that people obviously gave a damn about the movie, and that's good. Uh, so I'd like to see if we're going to actually like really start adapting every of all these old like classics, like the Disney versions of the fairy tales, and put them into like a live action type context. I would like to see films, I guess, more done in the style of Snow White and the Huntsman as opposed to a just flat comedy type thing. Uh, I mean, like, what's the good? Like I said, I'm still kind of gathering my thoughts here. I mean, like fairy tales for what they are. Like I get the original versions are generally pretty dark and gruesome. I mean, I haven't really like the only old fairy tale that I have actually ever read myself and can distinctly remember reading myself was The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. And this was after I had already fallen in love with the film version, and I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I saw the book in the library, and I asked mom to check it out for me. And I read the book, and I was like, oh, I was like in tears by the time I finished reading it. But I didn't really realize um, that the movie was based off of the book at that age. I think I'm not sure what age I realized that the Disney versions of the fairy tales were adaptations of previously established tales. I mean, I know I knew that they were adaptations of fairy tales, but I didn't know anything about the original fairy tale except for like the versions that everyone told, like of like Snow White. Once upon a time there was young girl, stepmother, evil stepmother who was vain and had the mirror every day and all that stuff about seven dwarves, and the end of it all, she bit an apple, got put into like the death like sleep, and queen died or whatever, and then the prince came by, kissed her, and brought her out of her sleep. So I grew up listening to stuff like that and watching the Disney-fied versions of them, which I love the Disney versions of the classical fairy tales. I'm not saying that they are all the best possible way to adapt fairy tales, but I'm saying that generally the Disney versions of fairy tales work best for like a family type audience. But for a modern audience like, our world today, I think it's okay to be darker. I think it's okay to be more serious with fairy tales because a lot of people now kind of we see the whole thing. We see things with kind of like two sides. We like what it is as it is, and then we see like we can make all our little jokes and little things about this kind of thing or whatever, uh, and look at it that way. So there are like with fairy tales there are like multiple different angles to look at them, uh, but Uh, but I would like to see like some darker, more serious takes on fairy tales. But I would like it though if they could also have those moments where it's like light and cheerful and happy, but not afraid to lapse into dark and serious and dramatic and emotional. Uh, Although I do think that the absolute hardest film, the hardest fairy tale to really be able to pull off like a dark, serious adaptation would be Cinderella, because the Cinderella story has been told, and people seem to have this weird fascination with the Cinderella story, like this whole rags to riches thing. If you work hard and do all this shit, put up with all this shit, at the very end of everything, you will get your just desserts, you will get your reward and everything. Whereas people that did all this shit to you will get nothing, or they will get what they deserved in the end, anyways, kind of thing. And I think our culture definitely does have like this weird kind of obsession with it because there's like all these like Cinderella story movies or whatever that are done, and all these like kind of redoings of the fairy tale and everything, or kind of like modernizations of it or whatever. I mean, there are really only so many different ways you can go with the story like Cinderella, but I do find it, if it were to be considered for like a dark adaptation, I do find it, or like a dark serious adaptation, I do find that it would be generally the hardest of fairy tales to do in a setting like that, simply because of the things we associate with the Cinderella story. Whereas something like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs there's a very clean cut line. This is our protagonist, this is our hero, this is our villain. These are our supporting characters. This is our plot. These are our plot elements and everything. And here's kind of what the fairy tale is. Uh, and so something like Snow White is something that I find, yeah, you can't like something that I'd really, if I were like to really try to do a dark adaptation of Snow White, I'd probably, looking at the shows for Snow White and the Huntsman, I probably would do something very similar to it. Although, if it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, I probably would use Seven Dwarves and actually use them in my film. Uh, as more than just, it's Snow White, so we have to have the dwarves. No, if I'm going to have, basically, I think if you're going, like, I'm going off on the tangent here. If you're going to do a fairy tale film, under the name of like Snow White or Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty, you need to have the elements that everyone associates with that story and actually go somewhere with them. Uh, you know, uh, like for Sleeping Beauty, what do people expect when they think of the Sleeping Beauty story? They think of the obviously they think of the princess. They think of the prince, the spinning wheel needle. They think of the enchanted sleep. They think of the uh, thorns, I guess, covering the castle, the fairies, and the antagonist or whatever, and the kiss that awakens the maiden at the very end. So, you would need to have all of that, and that's what like 8 things I've listed off right here. That's 8 things to incorporate into a film with a runtime of about 90 minutes or longer. So there's some way to do. I know there's a way to put all those together into a film and develop each and every one of those elements with the time you have given, and then still have room for that. I mean, well, I can't use the Disney version as the example because once again, the thing with Disney is that I think before the Little Mermaid, Disney didn't really give too much of a shit about their female protagonists really, like mainly in regards to like their personality and developing them as characters, whereas like in the films after like starting with Little Mermaid, I think it's when Disney was like, oh, we need to give our characters like goals, aspirations, and like personality, and kind of develop them as people, and look at them as real people in these kinds of settings and circumstances. But that's completely a different tangent. So, but that's generally what I think. Doing a live action version of Fairy Tail would be like. I think that probably the best fairy tale to be done in live action, or old story, I forget what we're gonna call it. I'm using the term fairy tale. The best fairy tale that I can see being done live action would be Beauty and the Beast. And I know that Beauty and the Beast has been done dark and serious and everything, but I would really like to see like a classic version, excuse me, of Beauty and the Beast. Uh, like kind of going back more to like the roots of the traditional fairy tale, but kind of taking some stuff from like the Disney version and obviously kind of like modernizing it a bit because I think that is the problem with doing fairy tale films nowadays is that kind like I the roles that the characters in fairy tales play generally, especially like when it comes to the female characters, they are very much they don't do much of anything, especially like Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and uh, Cinderella. The our leading ladies don't really do much of anything except for kind of be pretty and patient and wait around for the prince to do all the hard work. And even then, in the Disney versions, the princes didn't have much character to them either. The females and the side characters and the antagonists were the ones with the most characters. The princes were all just dull, bland, and boring. So I think that uh, kind of the problem with doing fairy tales is that they were written kind of with a very specific. I want to say this, and if I'm wrong, of course, in the comment section below, your own personal opinion, if you can bother to watch this far at all. But I think that fairy tales were written for a very specific audience in mind, and that the fact that they just became classics like this is, I guess, something of a coincidence or whatever. I don't know, maybe. But there is a lot really that you need to consider when doing a fairy tale film in the first place. And, you need to take all of, like, kind of the elements people associate with the classic tale, and then find some way to put a very good spin on them that, your audience will love and enjoy. Which is, which was generally what Disney did. I know I talk about Disney a lot, because Disney is really the company that is known for its fairy tale adaptations and for making good fairy tale adaptations. I guess I should be talking about them as kind of a contrast to what is probably going to be done with more film. Contrast Snow White and the Huntsman and Mirror Mirror to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, made by Walt Disney way back when. Uh, you're looking at three very different films that are all telling basically the same story, kind of. Well, no, they basically are telling the exact same story. Uh, so I guess that is like the way you can really go with fairy tales. You have the Disney version, then you can make like a comedy version, like kind of like a spoof of the fairy tale, and then you can make like the serious, dark, dramatic, emotional uh, take on it or whatever. Uh, and I think what Disney tends to do is they tend to kind of combine uh, both. They tend to take like comedy and lightheartedness and romance and everything, and put that together with something dark, emotional, and well, not too dark, but something something deep, something well, not too deep, something something emotional, something. Uh, Obviously, there are dark elements in Disney films, so I will say there are dark moments in the Disney renditions of fairy tales. So they kind of take both of those and put them together into one film with the very, earn your romance thing at the very end of it and all that. So, um, I I guess that's it, and I guess the question I would like to leave all of you with is, what do you want in a uh, fairy tale film? Then what is it that you want, and what are your thoughts on it? Leave your comments in the comment box below, and I'll see you next time with a review or question I have, or my thoughts, or whatever. It's your flashback signing out.